My name is Noah Harris. I'm 28, a freelance pianist living in New York. But if you ask me where I truly belong, I'll say South Houston, Texas, where the summer sky feels so wide it could swallow every last dream. I was born in a tiny apartment with a leaking roof and walls peeling so bad you could hear them flake off at night when it rained. My dad died in a truck accident when I was 7. Before he left, he gave me the only gift he ever could, an old beat-up piano he'd saved up for years of long-haul driving to buy from a thrift store. Dad used to say, "Noah, one day you'll play this at Carnegie Hall, or at least make someone's heart tremble." I didn't really get what he meant back then. All I knew was that every time I pressed a key, I felt like I stepped into another world, a place without bills, without my mom's exhausted sighs echoing through the house after another graveyard shift. My mom, Linda, was this frail woman with thinning hair from stress and cheap hair dye. She worked at 3 diners, her hands always smelling of fryer grease. She never talked much. She just scrubbed floors, washed dishes, and stuffed every single tip into an old glass jar on the kitchen shelf. I used to think she was a superhero, but there were days I hated her so much I wanted to disappear off the face of the earth. When I was 16, Houston was deep in the middle of one of those brutal heat waves. The power had been shut off because we couldn't pay the bill. The food in the fridge was rotting, and the landlord knocked on our door with a voice sharp as a razor, demanding rent. That day, I came home from practice to see my piano being dragged out to the driveway, next to some stranger's rusty pickup. I sprinted over, threw my arms around the keyboard, and screamed like a wounded animal, "Mom, please don't take it away." She stood in the doorway, eyes red and swollen, her fingers clawing the doorframe so hard they bled. Through ragged breaths, she whispered, "Noah, we don't have a choice. If we don't pay rent, we'll be on the streets." It felt like someone had ripped my chest open from the inside. I punched the wall until my hands stung, but no blood came out. I screamed, threw chairs, smashed my school books, but she didn't move. When the man started lifting my piano onto the truck bed, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I remembered every scratch, every cracked key, the first time Dad taught me Clair de Lune, his hands shaking from fatigue, but his eyes burning bright. Every single key felt like a piece of him, his final breaths made into sound. When the truck drove off, I chased it, pounding on the back, screaming until my voice was gone. I collapsed onto the dusty curb, my knees scraped and bleeding. Mom ran out to pick me up, but I shoved her away. "You killed my dream," I screamed, my voice cracking like broken piano keys. That night, I locked myself in my room and stared at the glass jar where she hid all the tip money. For a split second, I thought about ending it all. But then, I heard Dad's voice echoing somewhere deep inside me. "In America, you can fall, but never stop playing." I dropped to the floor and sobbed until the morning light crept in. The next day, I didn't go to school. I wandered the dusty streets of South Houston, listening to old country music drifting from auto shops, Willie Nelson's voice crooning, "On the Road Again." I kept asking myself, was there even a road left for me? That night, I climbed up to the sagging roof of our apartment, looking up at a sky so thick with stars it felt alive. I thought of Dad, of those summer nights when he'd drag the old radio out onto the porch, wiping sweat from his forehead while humming along to old Texas ballads. I took a deep breath, let the wind whip through my hair, and listened to my heart pounding like a war drum. I made a vow to myself. One day, I'll stand on the biggest stage. I'll play until they can't ignore me. I'll make Mom look at me, be proud, or, at least, understand. But deep inside, a cold voice whispered, "Are you strong enough, Noah? You'll break before you ever make it. Who believes in a kid with no piano, no father, no nothing? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that on that windy night, for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark flicker to life. And as long as that spark stayed alive, I wasn't gonna let it die. The next morning, I dragged myself into Houston College of Music with swollen eyes and hair matted from sweat. Everyone's stares locked onto me, and then the whispers started buzzing like a swarm of angry bees. I picked up bits and pieces. That's the kid who lost his piano. He probably just has an old busted radio now. Look at him, pathetic, cheap. That piano wasn't just an instrument, it was my lifeline to being here. And a school full of rich kids with private tutors, spotless practice rooms, polished shoes, and faces untouched by the grime of real life. I was an outsider crashing a country club party. Sarah, my childhood friend, used to swing by our apartment with sandwiches, dragging me outside whenever she saw me burying my face in a pillow. She once said, "Noah, don't let anyone, not even your mom, snuff out your dream." But after the piano was sold, Sarah started avoiding my gaze. The texts stopped getting replies. The empty seat next to me in the cafeteria stayed cold. One blistering afternoon, I saw her sitting with a group of the rich kids in the courtyard, giggling. As I walked past, this blonde guy with a face slick as glass elbowed her. "Hey, look, piano prodigy. Guess he's jamming on air keys now, huh?" Sarah stayed silent. Her eyes dropped to her brand new sneakers. I swallowed hard and kept walking, my chest sinking like someone had filled it with stones. From then on, every music theory class felt like getting slapped over and over. Mr. Parker, who used to believe in me so much, now barely glanced at me, just shook his head and looked back at his sheet music. One time I overheard him whisper to another teacher, "That boy, such a waste. No foundation, no support. He's finished." I started skipping class. I hid out in the old instrument storage room, the smell of rotting wood and rust burning in my nose. That's where I found a broken digital piano, half the keys jammed, the wiring all messed up. I sat there, trying to press the few working keys, listening to the warped, ragged sounds. But at least, it was still music. Every broken note felt like a faint breath, barely keeping me alive. One day, while I was quietly playing in that room, a teaching assistant walked in. He looked at me, smirked, and said, "Man, pathetic. You should just quit before you embarrass yourself anymore." I didn't answer. I just bowed my head and kept my fingers on the keys. I refused to cry in front of him, but my throat felt like it was on fire. My chest crushed under invisible weight. At night, back at the apartment, I still heard Mom coughing, then sighing into the silence. Sometimes she would rest her hand on my shoulder, her mouth opening as if to say something, but she'd always let go, turning back to the sink. I would close my door, press my forehead against the wall, and stay there with my eyes shut for what felt like forever. One night, sitting on the cracked basketball court behind the school, I heard an acoustic guitar floating through the dark. A group of students were playing country songs, one guy crooning "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain" by Willie Nelson, the same song my dad used to love. I remembered him saying, "Texas teaches you to get up, son. Nothing here comes free." My whole body shivered, my eyes stung. That was the first time I realized I was dying. Not because I had no piano, but because I let myself believe what they said, that I wasn't good enough, that I was worthless. After that night, I snuck back into the storage room whenever I could, playing that broken piano, recording it on my old phone. The sound was crackly and thin, but each note felt like a heartbeat. Sometimes I imagined Sarah standing in the corner, eyes closed, smiling as she listened. But when I opened my eyes, it was just shadows and the smell of damp wood. I started rewriting my dad's old melody, adding new notes, changing rhythms, turning it into something I called River of Texas, a piece I never dared to dream would echo under stage lights. Each time I finished a section, it felt like climbing another step on a staircase that only existed in my nightmares and daydreams. But deep inside, one question kept gnawing at me. Is anyone even listening, or am I just lulling myself deeper into my own loneliness? The following days, I started waking up before dawn, slipping out while Mom was still knocked out from her night shift. I walked through empty streets, hearing neon signs buzzing softly, smelling toasted bread drifting from the corner bakery mixed with the oily scent of the auto shop next door. I began hunting for any job I could find, anything that paid cash, anything that could get me 1 inch closer to another piano. I washed dishes at a Mexican diner, mopped floors at a laundromat, hauled boxes at a grocery warehouse. Some days I juggled 4 different jobs, my hands covered in blisters, my back screaming. Whenever I felt like I couldn't breathe, I'd hear Dad's voice. No one in Texas hands you anything, but if you play good enough, you'll make the whole town shut up and listen. After every shift, I would stop by Mr. Miller's old music studio, an old bald guy with a beer belly, but eyes so blue they could cut through a storm whenever he talked about country music. I first met him one night when I was pressing my face against his studio window like a kid staring into a candy store. Mr. Miller opened the door, looked me up and down, then gave a small laugh. I've seen that look before. Used to see it in my own eyes back when I played guitar in Austin. At first, I was too scared to step inside. But then he nodded, motioning me in. Come on, tonight, you play for free. From that night on, after scrubbing kitchens or dragging boxes, I'd slip into the studio. I'd practice until my hands shook, my shoulders slumped, my eyes burning from sleep deprivation. Some nights I'd nearly pass out on the keys. Mr. Miller would quietly drape his worn-out jacket over me and leave a water bottle at my side. When I woke up in the morning, he'd be sipping coffee, humming, "Always on My Mind." He never asked questions, just nodded. Between us, music said everything. One late afternoon, as I was cleaning the studio, I noticed a poster on the wall. American Young Virtuosos Competition. Perform at the Royal Gala at Lincoln Center, New York. My heart slammed against my ribs like lightning had struck me. This was it, the stage of all stages, the place where no one could ignore my sound. But the entry fee was nearly $500, an impossible mountain for me at the time. I looked at my cracked hands, then back at the poster, wondering, do I even dare? Or is this just another empty dream? I decided to work harder than ever. Some nights I washed dishes until 2 in the morning, then ran to the studio to play River of Texas hundreds of times, refining every tiny passage. I picked up bottles in the park to sell for change, asked to work early morning shifts at coffee shops. I even wiped car windows at the Walmart parking lot. One rainy day, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit saw me hunched over cleaning his windshield. He rolled down his window, handed me a $10 bill, and squinted. "Kid, don't waste your time on this. Go get yourself a real job." I just gave him a thin smile. In my head, there was only one image, the Lincoln Center stage, white lights pouring down, my music echoing through every inch of that hall. After 3 relentless months, I finally saved enough. The night I counted the money, my hands trembled so bad I dropped the stack twice. Mr. Miller stood beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Don't overthink it. You've already gone farther than those rich kids ever will." The day I submitted my application, I left the studio with red, swollen eyes and a storm in my chest. I knew this was it. No safety net. If I failed, I'd go right back to being a nameless busboy, forever crushed beneath their sneers. But if I made it, would Mom finally see me differently? Would she dare to step into that concert hall, look up at that stage, and believe that the son she'd once seen as a burden had really stood up on his own? That question burned me alive, but it also kept me breathing. The last night before I sent in my recording, I stared up at the studio ceiling and whispered to myself, "This isn't just a dream anymore. This is your lifeline, Noah." I'll never forget the moment I got that email. "Congratulations, you've passed the preliminary round. Get ready for the live performance in New York." I was trembling, tears streaming down my face, a wild mix of terror and euphoria swirling inside me. I collapsed right there on the studio floor, hugging the cold piano keys like I'd finally touched my dad's ghost, standing in the corner, nodding at me with that proud smile. News of my acceptance spread through campus like wildfire. The same classmates who used to laugh at me now just threw sideways glances when I walked into class. No more paper balls to the head, no more loud snickers. But that silence, it weighed on me more than all the mocking ever did. Sarah came back around, holding a box of cookies she said she baked herself. She knocked on the studio door while I was practicing River of Texas, standing there in silence for a long moment before saying, "Noah, I'm so proud of you." I looked at her, torn between wanting to pull her close and shoving her away. All those months she avoided me, abandoned me, felt like a knife twisting deeper every time I remembered. But in that moment, I caved. I invited her in to listen. Sarah curled up on the old wooden chair, her brown eyes glowing. When I finished, she broke down crying and threw her arms around me. Her chest pressed into my back, her breath warm and ragged against my ear. I could feel her heart pounding, smell the sweet hint of her shampoo, her soft body melting into my shoulders. We stayed in the studio until late. In that dim, quiet space, our hands and breaths tangled, and for a moment it felt like all the hurt had been scrubbed clean. Sarah whispered, "I always believed in you, even when I stayed silent." I shivered, unsure if that was true or just a late-night comfort lie. But right then, I let myself drift into that longing, to be held, to touch someone without feeling judged. The next morning, she was gone. No note. I woke up alone in the studio, her scent still clinging to my shirt. Doubt clawed at my mind, but I told myself, she's just shy, it'll be fine. A week before the New York performance, I got a call from the organizers. "It's urgent," they said. My heart crashed into my stomach as I raced to their local office. The manager handed me a document. I froze. Someone had sent my River of Texas arrangement to them, accusing me of stealing it from another student. It felt like getting slapped in the face with a brick. I yelled, "No, that's my piece. My dad gave me the original melody." But they just stared at me, cold and distant. In that moment of pure panic, I thought back to that last night with Sarah. I bolted straight to her apartment. The door was unlocked. I stormed inside and found her sitting on the floor, eyes puffy, hands shaking around her phone. When I roared, "What did you do?" she burst into ugly sobs. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to help you stand out, make people notice you. But everything spiraled out of control." I couldn't listen anymore. I turned, punching the wall so hard I felt the blood soak my hand, a sharp chill shooting up my spine. She grabbed at my legs, trying to pull me back, but I shoved her off. That night, I went back to the studio. I smashed the keys, flipped chairs, shattered glass. I slumped to the floor, my head against the wall, gasping for air. Mr. Miller walked in quietly, took in the wreckage, then stepped over and laid a hand on my shoulder. "You can curse the world, curse everyone, but don't kill the music inside you, Noah. If you do that, you're really gone." I looked at him through a haze of tears. He pulled me into a tight hug, tighter than anything I'd ever gotten from my dad or my mom. That night, I sat alone on the cold studio floor, listening to the rain hammer the tin roof like a sad blues rhythm. I had nothing left but my heavy breathing and an emptiness that gnawed at my bones. One question echoed over and over. Should I just give up, or is there still something worth living for, playing for, proving? The next morning, I woke up on the cold tile floor, my shoulders aching, the smell of dried blood clinging to my hands. Sunlight sliced through the broken window, casting jagged patterns on the wall. I looked around. The room was empty, keys from the shattered piano scattered across the floor like broken ribs. Suddenly my phone rang, slicing through the thick, heavy silence. It was Mr. Miller. His voice was low, raspy, but firm. "Get up. I won't let you die here. I've called a few friends to hear you play. If you're still breathing, show up." I dragged myself out of that wrecked studio, my head weighed down like someone had poured concrete inside it. I had no clue what I was doing, no energy to think. But when I reached the small cafe where Mr. Miller waited, I saw about 10 people sitting inside. Some old men with silver hair, a few young waitresses, and a woman I didn't know, her eyes bright and strangely sharp. Mr. Miller clapped his hands together. "This is Noah. He's about to perform in New York, if he can get past himself first." My mouth fell open, my heart seizing up. I'd never imagined playing in front of strangers, in a cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and fresh pastries. The woman nodded gently. "You can start whenever you're ready." My fingers curled into tight knots, trembling. But then I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. I sat at the battered piano shoved into the corner of the cafe. I played River of Texas. It began like a quiet whisper of waves drifting through a Texas night, then rose up, wild and fierce, like a storm tearing through dry plains. I poured every ounce of anger, love, grief for my dad, the sting of my mom's disappointment, all of it, into each key. When the last note faded, the room went so still I could hear a bead of sweat drip from my forehead onto the keys. The woman stood up, eyes glistening. "You can't quit. You have something none of those rich kids will ever have, soul." She handed me her card, music critic, guest judge at Lincoln Center. My heart clenched so hard I thought it might snap. I looked at Mr. Miller. He just gave me a small, proud smile. In that moment, I knew this wasn't just luck. This was the universe whispering, "Keep going, Noah." I went back to the studio, picking up each broken piano key, cleaning up the shards of glass, patching the piano together with cheap wood glue. I practiced all night, sweat soaking my shirt, my shoulders shivering. I played until my fingers bled, then bandaged them and kept going. Every stab of pain reminded me of Dad's words. "Music is the one thing no one can steal from you if you're brave enough to touch it." Mr. Miller came by each morning with coffee and sandwiches. He didn't say much, just sat in the corner, sometimes nodding along to the beat. Once I looked up and saw him quietly wiping his eyes. I knew he understood. I wasn't just fighting for a competition. I was clawing back the last piece of my soul. The day I left for New York, I carried a battered suitcase with a few old clothes and worn-out shoes. Mr. Miller walked me to the bus stop, his hand shaking on my shoulder. "You're not just going to perform. You're going to reclaim your dream. Don't let anyone bury it again." I looked around, searching for Mom's face, but she didn't show. My chest felt hollow, but there was no more anger left. Just a whisper, "Mom, I'll make you look at me. Just once." The night before the performance, I lay in the organizer's dorm bed, staring at the stained ceiling. I closed my eyes, hearing imaginary applause, feeling Dad's ghostly hand on my shoulder. "You did good, son." I smiled, tears slipping quietly into my pillow. I knew that tomorrow wasn't just a competition. It was the stage where I'd pour out my entire life, my blood, my tears, my everything. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just be Noah Harris, the kid whose piano was taken. Tomorrow, I'd be an artist. And the last question burned in my mind. Will Mom come? Or is she still hiding behind that kitchen sink, believing that dreams are just foolish illusions? That morning, New York felt cold enough to pierce bone. I stepped out of the dorm building, each breath curling into thin white ghosts in the air. People rushed past me, young artists, frantic backstage workers, glamorous guests in sparkling evening gowns and tuxedos. I clenched my fingers, feeling the bandages still stuck to my knuckles. Every step felt heavier, my head spinning with 1,000 city sounds. Taxi horns, high heels hammering the pavement, the wind howling through skyscrapers. But inside me, there was only one sound, the rhythm of River of Texas. The backstage waiting room was huge, yellow light casting long shadows across the wooden walls, rows of chairs lined up like silent judges. I curled up in a corner, hands shaking, cold sweat dripping down my neck. An assistant approached, handing me a cup of water. "Mr. Harris, you're on in 15. I nodded, unable to speak. The loudspeaker echoed, "Next performer, please prepare to come on stage." My heart pounded so hard I thought my chest would crack open. I stood, feeling like I was walking a tightrope suspended over nothing. As I stepped into the wings, the stage lights stabbed at my eyes, forcing me to squint. And then, across a sea of elegant suits and shimmering gowns, I saw Mom. She was sitting in the very last row, wearing a thin, wrinkled coat, her brittle hair pulled back, hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled ticket. Her eyes were locked on the stage, glowing with something between regret and desperate hope. My chest tightened like a fist was squeezing my heart, my breath caught in jagged shards. A storm of questions ripped through me. Why is she here? Does she truly believe in me, or is she waiting to watch me fail one last time? They called my name. I stepped forward, the spotlight scorching down, my vision blurring as thousands of eyes bore into me. I sat in front of the gleaming Steinway & Sons Grand, my fingers hovering above the keys. In that instant, I closed my eyes and heard Dad's voice. "This is your moment. Play for no one else. Play for you." The first note rang out, then another, and soon a whole river of sound carried me away. I felt every vein, every cell in my body surge as if being washed clean. River of Texas no longer sounded like rage. It transformed into a whisper, an apology, a thank you, for Dad, for Mom, for the abandoned boy still hiding inside me. At the crescendo, I opened my eyes. I saw Mom, her head bowed, shoulders trembling violently. Tears spilled onto her crushed ticket. The entire hall fell silent, held in the current of my music, like the Texas River flowing straight through every heart in the room. I let the final note linger, my hands dropping to my lap, my body collapsing with it. The audience exploded into a standing ovation, applause so fierce I thought the stage might shatter. I bowed, tears flooding down, splashing onto the cold ivory keys. Backstage, I collapsed into a chair, panting. Through the chaos, Mom pushed forward, weaving past reporters and staff, finally stopping in front of me. She shook all over, her lips trembling as she managed to whisper, "Noah, I'm sorry." I looked up. For the first time, she didn't look like that harsh, unyielding woman. She looked small, fragile, her eyes swollen, her hands calloused from 1,000 silent nights scrubbing dishes. She dropped to her knees, grabbing my hands, her voice breaking. "I didn't know. I just wanted to keep a roof over us. I was so scared you'd starve, scared we'd be thrown out. I didn't mean to kill your dream. I was wrong." I pulled her up and wrapped my arms around her. Her whole body shook like a leaf. I breathed in the scent of sweat, smoke, and decades of silent sacrifice. I broke down, my tears soaking her collar. I get it now. I don't hate you anymore. I just needed you to believe I could rise with these hands. She clung to me tighter, unable to speak, her head buried into my shoulder. The room was crowded, voices buzzing, cameras clicking, but in that moment, it was just the two of us, clinging to each other like we were warming our hearts for the first time after years in the cold. Through the chaos, I heard the snap of cameras, the whispers of reporters, but none of it mattered. All I knew was, this time, Mom came, and she didn't sell anything away. One last question echoed through my mind. I've forgiven her, but am I strong enough to keep going now that everything has been laid bare? The next morning, my name splashed across every local front page. Noah Harris, the pianist from Houston who silenced Lincoln Center. The headlines milked the story. The boy who lost his piano took back his dream. From a Texas kitchen to the royal stage. I sat in my hotel room, hugging a hot coffee, staring at a photo of Mom hugging me backstage. The camera flash caught her face, worn, exhausted, but overflowing with love. My phone buzzed nonstop. Juilliard called, offering a full scholarship and invitations to tour Europe. A major record producer wanted to sign me to an exclusive recording contract, promising funding and a carefully crafted image. From the ground up, they said. But I didn't rush to answer. I left the hotel and wandered through Central Park, my breath swirling into the icy morning air. I thought about those suffocating Houston nights, about holding Mom the night before. None of this was about revenge or proving I deserved to exist. It was about standing tall, free, living true to my own heartbeat. That afternoon, Mom and I sat by the Hudson River. She clutched her paper coffee cup, eyes fixed on the water, silent. I squeezed her hand, feeling the rough skin, each wrinkle a map of countless sleepless nights. "Mom," I whispered. She turned, her eyes tired but warm. "I don't blame you anymore. I know. You were just a woman terrified of losing the roof over our heads, terrified of watching me starve." Her eyes welled up, lips trembling as she tried to smile. "I was wrong, but you did it. You kept your promise to your father." I nodded, glancing at the heavy gray sky. "Yeah, I kept it. And now I want you to keep your promise to me. From now on, you live for you, not for rent money, not for neighborhood gossip. You have to believe you deserve to be happy." She broke down, throwing her arms around me, her breath shuddering against my neck. In that hug, I felt like I was embracing every lost year of her life. When we got back to the hotel, I signed the Juilliard contract. I chose the scholarship, the training, the grind, not just to become a great artist, but to prove to myself that I was worthy of every single note. The press conference happened the next day. Flashbulbs popped, questions flew at me like arrows. What kept you going after being betrayed? Do you still resent your mother? What would you say to the people who mocked you? I smiled, stepping up to the podium, my voice steady. I used to hate my mom. I used to want to throw everything away. But I realized if I let that rage consume me, I'd be nothing but an empty shell. Music can't be born from hatred. It needs love, forgiveness, and the courage to rise after you've been knocked down. The room fell silent. One reporter openly wept, wiping her eyes with a tissue. I looked down to the front row and saw Mom nodding, gently clapping, her eyes shining with a pride I had never seen before. At the end of the conference, I signed the final document, officially becoming a Juilliard student. I knew this wasn't an ending, it was a new beginning, a fresh start on the road to Carnegie Hall, to sharing River of Texas with audiences around the world. And this time, I wasn't walking alone. I had Mom beside me, Mr. Miller's quiet strength, Dad's imaginary applause, and all the people waiting to hear my story through every note. I looked up at the darkening New York sky and smiled. Finally, I've become who I was meant to be.